Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. Today on the show, I'm delighted to be joined by James Horton. James is author of Blue Swords, his first book in the Crimes and Crests Saga, which combines his passion for medieval stories and his experience in the police force. Hi, James, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Bob, and thanks for having me on your show. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, it's great to have you on. I have to say, I've just finished your book. I got it on the Kindle, Super. And it was absolutely fantastic. I couldn't put it down.
Brilliant. That's brilliant to hear. That's music to my ears, Bob. Thank you.
Anyway, however, so before we talk about the book, it's obviously received a huge number of rave and excellent reviews on Amazon so far. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please, and your background and how you decided to become an author?
Of course, yeah. So I'm 36 and currently living in the sort of Peterborough, Cambridgeshire border of South Lincolnshire. I'm a police officer. That's my full-time job and that's my full-time role. And the writing is sort of my hobby as such, which hopefully will progress a little bit further. I got round to writing a book after many years of toying with the idea and toying with different concepts and premises and what to write about. Finally got a medieval fantasy novel published in July this year. So and it seems to be doing really well. And to answer obviously the question as well, it was all done after falling ill back in 2011. Actually, that's when I came up with the idea.
Yeah.
It was part of a recovery after sadly I suffered a stroke when I was quite young. Like I said, when I was 27 years old. So it was kind of the writing became, or the idea of writing almost became a bit of an aid to my recovery, really. So that's where the whole idea sort of generated from.
So you're almost you had a terrible illness, and the recovery. This actually helped you recover, did it?
Yes, certainly. So so after the stroke back in 2011, I really struggled with anxiety and I'd say a slight bit of depression actually. That wasn't diagnosed officially, but I definitely wasn't myself, and it took a long time to find. To sort of get my head back in gear, really. It sort of the aftermath of it was probably worse than actually having the stroke itself. And I turned to fantasy novels. Actually, I struggled to sleep, and I started listening on the audio CDs. Actually, it was CDs then. Where I started to listen to some fantasy audio novels, and they were fantastic. And there were ways to sort of help me unwind and escapism, really switch off from everything. And as I kept going, I thought, I'd love to do my own story. I've always had a bit of a crazy imagination, been a big fan of writing. I remember at primary school writing, the best part of it was writing stories and making up these, fictional stories as such. So I thought, but then, probably like a lot of writers found initially, is I thought, well, who's going to want to read anything I write? I didn't sadly do enough at school, which I should have done, and I regret massively. Who's going to be interested? Am I even capable of writing? That what anyone would read. So it was an idea I toyed with after that for a long time, and spent many nights laying there rather than listening to the audiobooks, actually coming up with my own story as such, fantasy novel. So
you were in the Metropolitan Police. You had your stroke at 27. How long were you sort of in recovery mode? How long did it take to get back to work?
I was very, very fortunate. I was back to work within 8 months, which was I'd really count my blessings. Initially, I lost a lot of sensory in my left hand side. So it was my left arm, left leg that was mainly affected, and the whole kind of sort of numbness feeling as such, probably the best way to describe it, lasted probably about 6 to 12 weeks. So after that, it was building myself up through rehabilitation and so on, and actually physically I came recovered quite well. Mentally, that takes something that's ongoing, I think, for I think any stroke survivor would probably say probably for the rest of your life, really, sadly.
Yeah.
But it's something you can deal with over time, and that's
And did you go back
So
to the Met?
Yes. So I was back full time in the Metropolitan Police, and then after a few years, I decided to come back home to Lincolnshire. That was where I was born, as such, so in Grantham, so not far from yourself. But I decided to head back to Lincolnshire and sort of settle. I sort of had enough of the hustle and bustle of London as well.
Yeah.
So I came back to Lincolnshire, and that's where I currently work now.
Yeah. So the book itself is set in a place called Stanford. That's with an N, not an M. And obviously, we both live not far from Stamford. Did you use the actual town itself of Stamford to base the novel around?
I did. Yes, 100%. So at the time when I'd sort of come up with the idea and the concept of the book, I then sort of storyboard. I started writing down ideas of names, of locations, because I wanted it to be fantasy.
Yeah.
But also, I was very keen for it to be set and realistic in its certain aspects as well. So obviously with the medieval era, I was really keen to stick and be true to what happened back then. However, I didn't want to sort of make it completely 100% accurate in regards to as a historic sort of fact novel. So I was living in Stamford and working there actually at the time in the police, and it was a fantastic place to work and a lovely place to live, as you know. And I decided to use different areas and road names, and actually the whole layout of the Stamford, which is the main sort of setting in the book, is pretty close to the layout of Stamford in Lincolnshire. As when writing it, I was always kind of picturing the town and using areas in the town like the market squares, accurate as well, along with Main Street that runs onto Main Street. And there's also a couple of hidden places in there that I frequented, quite a lot. And so it's very good.
So the name Blue Swords, tell us about where you got that name from.
So the blue aspect came from the police itself. Obviously, the thin blue line, or and etc. And so I liked the idea of trying to mix up. When I wrote the book, the biggest thing for me was to write about something you know and something you love. So the medieval side of it in the title, obviously, it's swords, which is something I love, the time I loved and time I enjoyed writing about. And the blue comes from the police, i.e. where I work. So something I like to hope I know a little bit about after sort of 16 and a half years. Yeah.
So obviously the police, as we know them today, weren't actually around in medieval times, but did they presumably had guardians of people?
Yeah, so actually it's funny, I've been asked this question a couple of times. The whole police premise in the book is completely fictional. There was no police as such back then, but obviously there was your crown regal guards that did the patrols of the larger towns and cities. And as for villages, sometimes wasn't anybody at all to patrol them. So, and that comes across quite apparent in the book as well. But yeah, so the actual characters, the Blue Swords in the book, are effectively a medieval police force, which is where I like to hope it does sort of differentiates itself from other books.
Well, I certainly think the way that you depicted the characters, the description of the scenery, the actual feel of what it would have been like in those times, with all the grime and the agriculture, but also you bring in concepts like love.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of there's a couple of sort of side concepts, I'd say. Like you say, one being love, as you said. I like to hope it's. I've always been a big fan of romance, actually, and romantic novels.
As long as the hero's got a sword in his hand.
yeah. Do you know what? It sounds. I hope it doesn't sound too cheesy, but I really miss the old style sort of films and books that, you know, like what we saw probably more in the 80s, 90s. You know, this very simplistic story of good versus evil with a love story entwined, and you know, and so on. And I really wanted to bring that back in the book. I didn't want to make it overcomplicated. I didn't want you know, my friends and family and other readers to read it and sort of go, oh, blimey, it doesn't really, I can't really work out what's going on, who's going on. You know, I wanted it to be quite a simple storyline, and something that, more for anything, that can offer a bit of escapism. I think love and romance definitely does that.
And the other thing, although it's, you know, there's some serious themes in there, I like the way you use the humour, particularly between the Blue Swords themselves. Was that something, I mean, in terms of the police themselves and your colleagues or ex-colleagues and current colleagues, did you use some of that experience?
Yeah, I wanted to get across in the police that the sort of, there is a canteen culture to a certain point, and it generally is always done tastefully. But obviously every day, you know, cops are going out and, you know, and like any emergency services, dealing with some horrendous, you know, incidents. You know, it's you know, a bad day is a real bad day as a police officer. And you know, a way of coping with that, and it's been a coping technique for a lot of police officers, not everybody, but some. You know, humour is one way of sort of, you know, bravado as such, maybe, and that I wanted to reflect that in the book. So you know, where there is a couple of incidents that have happened, you know, there's certain characters that sort of, you know, make light of that incident, whereas the more sort of premature newer officers, or should I say swords, struggling to get the head round why someone would sort of find that amusing. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And like I say, with all the other themes going on, it was sort of lightened the atmosphere at times. It was good.
Yeah, and that does happen. That is the police. That is, you know, you'll have, you know, and I hate to say it is a bravado within the police a little bit, and a bit of a it's a you know, a technique to sort of, you know, protect yourself, and it is sometimes a bit of a showboating. It's not always how people feel, but it's how they like to come across their colleagues, and, you know, actually, and it sort of masks how maybe they are feeling inside a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, you obviously enjoy writing by the very fact that this is your first book, and you've actually got this as your first book in the Crimes and Crests Saga. So we've got more books on the way.
Yes. So and I'm actually currently about chapter 9 now of the follow-up book, which I'm enjoying even more, actually, writing. And I've gone for, I really want to keep the medieval fantasy and the romance there, but I also want to, you know, as the main sort of saga title says, Crimes and Crests, I really want to keep the crime aspect in there and the policing aspect in there. So so that is going to be covered. I mean, there is obviously a lot of crime aspects in the first one, but the second one's going to reflect a lot more on sort of I wouldn't say it's a crime thriller, but it's probably a medieval crime thriller, if there is one.
Yes, yeah. No, I think certainly the fact that you've got this police thing going on makes the story very unique.
Thank you.
Rather than just another medieval fiction story. No,
yeah, no, I appreciate. Thank you.
So, in terms of your writing process, you're a young man, you've got a young family, and you've got a job. How does that work?
Well, I'm quite strict on it, really. I mean, I'll never allow writing at the minute to overtake. Well, I say at the minute, at any time, to overtake my sort of family life, which is my main priority over everything, actually. So once the kids are in bed, I crack open the laptop and I'm quite strict. I give myself about an hour a day, which again doesn't sound a lot, but I find myself, I can lose my chain of thought quite easily. That is one of the after effects of having a stroke. And so I find, there's a police car going by now. It's, you know, I do find it does help just to keep that limited time and keeps the flow going. Whereas if I try and do too many words in a night or try and overdo it, I find that, you know, the flow starts to get affected, and actually a lot more mistakes start cropping up as well. So no, I try and budget an hour a night.
And do you find that during the day you're actually sort of obviously you're working, but at quieter times you find yourself thinking about the storyline?
Yeah, I'm daydreaming about it all the time.
I didn't want to use the word daydream, James.
Yeah, no, you've caught me out actually there, Bob. Yeah, I spend a lot of the time daydreaming, and do you know what's really funny actually, because now and again you'll be thinking about where you're going with the story, and you've got an overall idea of where the book's going, but when you come up with an idea that sort of fits in nicely, and you're like, oh, and it sort of shocked yourself, it's almost like winning the lottery a little bit. You sort of, oh, I love that, and then I'm panicking because I can be quite forgetful. I'm panicking because I think, oh, I need to remember what I've just thought of. I need to remember, so I've got a little pen and paper that I just quickly scroll notes down now and again. So I am. It is. I mean, it is on my mind a lot. Yeah, it's very exciting at the minute because it's so new.
And when you're actually writing at night, do you actually find you've obviously built these ideas up over the day, so you're putting those down. But do you also come up with ideas as you're writing? Is that how the process works?
Sometimes, yeah, it works both ways actually. Sometimes you do, and it's fantastic. And actually, when you're writing, you're like, oh wow, this is even better than I wanted it to be. But then sometimes it can have the opposite effect, where when you're sort of executing what you've thought of, it just doesn't come across how you thought it was going to. So you kind of can be a bit disappointed in that fact. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody has their own ways, I'd imagine, of writing, and sort of the other authors I've spoken to and read about, especially some of the more dominant names.
Yes.
They all have their own concepts. I mean, me personally, I've got an overall view of where I want the story to go and what I want to happen.
Yeah.
But I actually just do it one chapter at a time, and people are a bit surprised when I say that, but that is how I enjoy it. I enjoy, there's nothing to stop me going back to it and changing it, but generally I like doing with a end goal in mind, one chapter at a time, and and that's it. I focus just on that one chapter, and that's how and that's what I enjoy doing as well.
So how long would in terms of hours, how long would a chapter normally take you?
Oh, blimey. It's a good question actually. I'd say I'd like to hope I spend at least a week on a chapter.
Yeah.
If I'm honest. And then I'm a full-time employed police officer as well, so work commitments do, I shouldn't say get in the way, because not at all. That's my primary role. But there can be times where I have to miss a few days, because of extended hours at work, etc., or work that's come in. But on average, I'd say about a week per chapter.
And what do your police colleagues think of your stories? I presume they've read the book, many of them.
Yeah, and do you know what? As a lot of people listening to this will probably imagine, that they're quite difficult people to please. Police officers, almost a bit like football referees. It's had a really good I've had some great feedback from colleagues, and I've tried to keep it really true to policing. So even though there is a medieval aspect there, there's a parade room, just like today's police stations, the briefing. So there is a lot of police procedure in there, and it's honest police procedure. It's not, that's one thing I thought was really important. Writing, that you need to write about something that you do know about. It's not fair to the reader to sort of, and I see a lot of people get criticised when they do write about things they don't know about as such. So I've tried to keep the policing aspect as honest as possible, and that in turn has led to good feedback from police officers and colleagues.
Well, you've certainly had I left a review this morning actually on the book.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no. And I did notice quite a number of very good reviews, so that's very good. And I'm sure, as one or two people have said when they've left their reviews, they're really looking forward to the next book.
Yeah, it's a funny. Do you know what? I've never ever put myself out there, Bob, at all with anything. I've always kind of took a step back, and some ways been a bit of Mr. Grey man, if that makes sense. I don't, and this is the first time I've ever put myself out there, and getting the positive reviews are fun. Someone described it to me like armor. It's like every time you get a good review, you get this extra plate of armor and you feel great, and then every time you get a bad one, that's torn off and thrown again. But it's something, generally the reviews I like to hope are very positive.
Yeah, and I guess as a first novel, you're still learning your craft.
Hugely. And do you know what? If there is I really appreciate the constructive criticism. They're fantastic reviews, because actually, and they have helped me sort of in producing the second novel. I like to, these people have, read so many books, and, and they're my biggest help, really, tutors as such. So I do really appreciate that kind of, advice back.
So in the whole process of writing this book, what's been the biggest thing that you've got from it?
The great question, and the biggest thing is the awareness. It's a local newspaper did an article, and it raised quite a lot of views on Facebook and other social media sites, and it was to do with the concept of having used writing as a way of recovery, whether that be from having a stroke, from any kind of injury or illness, or mental health or mental well-being conditions. And actually, I think it's the awareness that it's put out there, and I cannot believe, and I'm completely, to this day, really overwhelmed with the support I've got, the messages I've got off people that have suffered strokes, that have, suffered other horrible illnesses. And it's overwhelming, and that has been the best thing to come. I mean, you could sell thousands and thousands of books, but when you know that, somebody, I had an email a couple of weeks ago from a lady down south who said to me, just reading your story of your recovery and knowing that you've gone on to write this has really given me a bit of hope myself.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And she'd just recently suffered a stroke. And do you know what? That was better than, that would be better than being a best-selling author to me. Yeah. It meant so much. And because of that, actually, I have decided, with having a meeting with the Stroke Association a couple of weeks ago, that any future proceeds, profits that come to me, will be directly sent straight back to the Stroke Association now.
That's a marvellous thing to do.
Yeah, it came all at a certain time. It wasn't something on my mind to start with, but then I think with, like I say, the support and the messages I've received, just meeting, I've met so many different people all around the world now, virtually, obviously, through social media, and it's just, it's been overwhelming. I can't it's talking about it now makes me emotional. And that is the best thing to have come out of this altogether. So it did, and then it did feel like the right thing to do. Yeah, definitely.
Well, what we'll do, we'll put all this on the show notes. So about the it's called the Stroke Association, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Stroke Association UK. So it's quite a large charity, and it's to support their current campaign that's running now, which is Hope. Which is their current campaign.
Well, that's brilliant. So you can read a great book, and all the proceeds are going to go to a very worthwhile cause. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, every penny of profit that would have come to me is being sent. So it's been agreed by my publisher as well. That it'll be sent straight to the Stroke Association UK, and that'll be ongoing. That's not going to change anytime.
No, that's great stuff. One thing I wanted to ask was if there are any listeners out there who fancy writing a book and they think, well, I'm not sure whether I could, but I've got an idea. What would you say to them?
I'd say please do it. Please, do you know what? Give it a go, because it's. I mean, it is I hate the saying roller coaster, but I'm going to have to use it because I can't think of anything else. But it is a roller coaster. It's, there's days where it took me 4 years to do this, because I gave up so many times, and thought this is awful. I can't, even read this back to myself, and with a bit of support from friends, some people who did take a look at it said, "Oh, you've really got something here. This is a great story. Keep going." So, if I can do it, anybody can do it, and I do really mean that. It's so important that. And one message I want to say is, however you want to do it, whether it's by blogging, whether it's by short stories, poems, novels, whatever it wants to be, if you can write it down and find that escapism, it helped me. So I'm not going to patronise people and say that will help them, because I don't know, but it saved my mindset at times. It really has. So please, anyone can do it, and anyone has a right to do it as well. So please do it.
That's great. That's a great story. Now, where can people get hold of your book, James?
So the book's available on various online sites. Some of the big ones like Amazon, obviously, and Waterstones, Blackwells, etc.
Yeah.
And then it should be available in all good bookstores as well. So hopefully being stocked in there.
Yeah, so electronic and hard copy.
Yeah, there's paperback and ebook available. So it's available, and it's both that will be going. Proceeds will be going to the Stroke Association.
Oh, that's excellent. And where can people find out more about you and your work, James?
So I've got it's all very new to me, but I've got a Facebook page. It's under James Horton at Crimes and Crests. And that's I can be found on there. So it's a page that I sort of update regularly with things that are going on, and it's got a few followers now, and some really nice people. And please, if anyone ever wants to get in contact, please do, because it's the best thing. Messaging about this whole process is fantastic.
We'll put all that on the show notes, James. This has been a great conversation, and thank you ever so much for being a guest.
And Bob, thank you for inviting me on. It's a great show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have been listening to Undercurrent Stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share the show link to your friends and family, and if you have 60 seconds, I will be most grateful if you would please rate and review. To hear more episodes, please subscribe to the show and visit undercurrentstories.com. If you leave your email in the link, we will notify you as soon as new episodes are released. Also, check out our social media links, details of which can be found on the show notes. Until next time, this is Bob Wells wishing you all the very best.